All right. Hey guys, it is McDev, and we are doing another free code camp lesson. Last time I recorded this, I had no audio, so let's hope this is better. All right, so we are going to break this down to three parts. We're going to try to understand our objective, then we're going to dive into the solution, and if there's anything interesting that we want to talk about after the fact, we'll do bonus content. All right, so first off, to understand the objective, I'm going to skip this description and I'm just going to read the objective, and then we'll go through more. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to give our form, which I believe this is the form right here, our form, which now has the ID attribute of cat photo form, a green background. Okay? So we're going to give this form a green background. Now, up to this point, we've already found a couple different ways to give things green backgrounds. So there's a specific way they want us to do that. So let's read the description. Use an ID attribute to style an element. One cool thing about ID attributes is that, like classes, you can style them using CSS. However, an ID is not reusable, and should only be applied to one element. An ID has a higher specificity, aka a higher importance, than class. So if both are applied to the same element and have conflicting styles, the style of the ID will be applied. So let's just say, for example, that you have in here, you have a style that says, hey, make the text red. But then you have an ID selector thing that says, make the color green. Then the browser's going to say, okay, am I going to make it red because the class is red, or am I going to make it green because the ID styling is green? It's going to choose the green over the red because the ID is more specific, it's more important. All right, so moving back into the content, here is an example of how to take your element with the ID attribute of cat photo element and give it a background color of green in your style element. So we have cat photo element. Inside there, we're saying we're going to make the background color green. Notice that inside your style element, you always reference classes with the period at the beginning. These are classes. However, for IDs, like right here, that you're using a hashtag or a pound sign right here in front of it. Okay, so I think we have a better understanding of what we need to accomplish here. We're going to give this a green background color, but we're going to do it using its ID, it's not using a class. All right, so let's dive into the solution. So first, we're going to want to find the form. I think I found it right here. And we notice inside the form, we have the ID of cat photo form. So that's our ID. Now we're going to move into our style section right here. Those are style tags. So inside here, and it can be anywhere in here, the order does matter technically, but in this case it doesn't. So we are going to begin it with the pound symbol as we saw here, and then the name of the ID. And like always, we need to give it sort of like a container to put stuff in, and that's the brackets. That's kind of like the box that the stuff goes inside of. And if we remember, it said that they wanted us to give it a background color of green. So we're going to say background color is green. And it updates, and we have this ugly looking form with its lovely green background. All right, and so that's the solution. And so we're going to go ahead and run the tests. Ta-da! And we've completed this. So that rounds up the solution. So let's do a little bit of bonus content. You can end the video here if you want, but this would just be some extra information for you. So the CSS is kind of tricky in some ways. And one thing that tends to confuse or like just, throw a little bit of a curveball at people as they're learning it, is not realizing the order of importance that styles get applied. So let's just do it like an experiment here, and we're going to create an element, and we're going to experiment with the order in which styles get applied. All right. So we're just going to create a div. And we're going to say, what color am I? All right, where did that show up here? It showed up right up here. All right, and for this div, let's start with a very generic selector. Let's say div, and so we're saying all of the divs, not just this one, but all of the divs. We want you to have the background color of hashtag coffee. I think it's EE. All right, so we got that cool like aqua color up there. All right, so it now has div color, background color of that aqua turquoisey color. All right, so now let's say I add another div selector after this one. And this is redundant. You don't really need to do this, but it's here to prove a point and to learn something. So we're going to say background color is something ugly. Let's just do a real harsh red, something we're not going to like seeing. All right. So here we see that this one is getting applied. The red is getting applied instead of the cool color because of the order it's in. So we can just switch the order around. Okay, and so now the coffee one is winning out. All right, so now what happens? Okay, so let's say we add a class here. What do you think is going to happen if we add a class with the color of brown? And we have it before the divs, right? So far, whatever one comes last on the style sheet is the one that wins. So what happens if we do a class color first? Well, let's find out. And it's great to guess, even if you guess wrong, it gives your brain kind of some context to start with. So we're going to say the class is, we're just going to call it brown. Be real creative. All right. And classes start with what? They start with a dot. We're going to call it brown. Give it a container to put the styles in. We're going to say background color is brown. And here we have a reddish brown color that's winning out even though it is higher up in the list than the divs. And so as you can imagine, if I were to put another brown, we're just going to override the brown class and we're going to call it tan. This one is winning out over all of these because it's a class, which makes it more important than these, and it's the last class that was defined. Okay. So, and it doesn't really matter for the name. I could call this tan, and I could give the div brown and tan. And tan is still going to win out because it's the last class here. And it doesn't really matter what order I have them in the div. I could say tan first, brown second. This doesn't matter. This order doesn't matter, but this order does. Okay, so classes are winning. Now let's add ID into the ring. Okay, so we're going to give the ID equals yellow. Okay, so if we remember how to make an ID, We're going to say hashtag yellow and give it a container to put stuff in. Say background color is yellow. Okay, so we can now see that the ID selector is the most important out of all of these, because even though these are getting applied after, this one is still getting applied. Cool. So that might seem like that's it. That's all there really is to know here. But there's another level to this. In HTML, you can also apply styles inside the element itself. I personally don't recommend doing this. A lot of people would recommend not doing this. This isn't really the best way to style things, but you may find a use for it here and there. And it's good to know in the back of your mind that you can do this. So we're going to say style equals, we've done so many colors. Let's just say a boring blue. We'll just still, no, yeah, blue's fine. Style, so we're going to say background color is blue. And so even though we have all of these telling to be different colors, the color that's winning out is the blue color because that is an inline style. And so when you were writing a program and you're doing all of the CSS, inline styles can be a headache because you're like, why can't I change the color of this? And it's probably because you have an inline style or you've got something else messing up with it. Okay, so just to recap, the most important styling is the inline styling, and we don't want to use that as a heuristic. The second most important one is the ID selection. After that, we have the class selection, and then after that, we have the generic element selection. So, let's see here. We could add one other like nuance to it, and this stuff I think if you understand this layer it would be somewhat intuitive. If we notice that the div here, it's inside of the main element because the closing for the main element's down here. So we could say like the main element, everything in the background of the main element's this color, but then the div would be more specific because we're talking about this specific or all of the divs, not just all the divs inside of main. And then after that, we have classes. After that, we have IDs. And then after that, we have the order in which the classes or whatever styles are applied. Okay, so that was a lot, but I hope it will be helpful sometime in the future when you get confused by something with CSS, because that's usually the sticking point. All right, guys, it's been